you talked about old stories. Now you were talking about, stories being looked at very differently now than they were before. We're more analytical about what was being handed to us. And of course, Dr. Seuss and, and even in the story, stories like Babar, they're very racist. There are very racist elements in them. So, there's that reckoning too.
Yeah, that was before the rush start of the podcast. When we were talking about writing, I had mentioned that previous guest Kyle Lukoff had disillusioned me about one of my favorite novels by Roald Dahl. And I had accepted that The Witches was sexist, but he pointed out why it was also racist as well, and many other concerning elements that made me say, oh, that makes me sad. And it makes me sad not just in, oh, I was a child and I loved that story and now I'm an adult and I have to, when I mentioned how much I love this story, I have to bring up first this little preface that, hey, it was a different time. It wasn't that different though. Yeah. Somebody in the editorial office should have stopped Mr. Dahl and said, hey, you know what, maybe we do another pass at this before we publish it, but whatever. The other thing about that makes me a little bit concerned, and maybe this is a shared concern for you as well, is this idea that Roald Dahl, despite being obviously very flawed, was a product of his time. There were plenty of racist, sexist people during that time. They didn't all write Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The man had the gift of storytelling. And so it worries me a little bit that if a man that objectively brilliant, at least in terms of telling stories, can be that far off and that wrong and now kind of paying a price for it, well, I mean, he's dead. I don't know if this bothers him at all or not. But in terms of his fiction, that we do have to qualify when we talk about Roald Dahl, those things that are also true about him. Does that worry you? It worries me a little bit that as readers continue to progress, by definition, they will have progressed and they will be smarter. They will know more. If they're looking back at things I've written at all, just by definition of how far they've gone, they're going to be lacking. They won't be caught up. And I hate to judge writers of the past too harshly for not knowing what they didn't know, knowing that theoretically my time is coming. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of us thinking about that. One of my favorite podcasts besides yours is Book Friends Forever, which is Grace Lynn and Alvina Ling, and Grace discusses having written a book that she wishes she hadn't done or wouldn't do now, and I think that that's true. I have one, well, let me think. I have, when we get to ghosts, I had a book called Dead on Town Line that's out of print now. I also had a book called The Things You Kiss Goodbye. And it was a little bit of a departure for me. It was more of a YA book. And, it's about a girl in an abusive relationship. And what I thought was, it's sort of a good sign for the world and yet wasn't great for me, was I think that the readers felt very impatient with her. They said, she's an idiot. She lets this guy beat her up and she, and lets her push him around. And I think that it was hard for them to reconcile. And I know that book, for instance, would never survive the Me Too movement. It would be looked at as really, really dusty now. And it should be. Still kind of a good read in its own way, but there would be a real impatience with it because we've, had movement. We continue to raise our conscience, and I think that that's positive. But yeah, you do wonder, what's going to be my reckoning? What have I put in a book? Even phrases I worry about sometimes, because some of them, I think they may have some phrases that we use a lot have roots in something that we didn't realize they had, was the roots, like circling the wagons is really not, that's really not something that we want to put in a book anymore. That's a reference that we don't want to make. So anyway, I think it's an ongoing thing. And I think I don't know. For me, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think that acknowledging that you might have written it differently is really the only step, the only action that you have to take. It's in print. You can ask for it to be, not reprinted, I suppose, if you feel really strongly about it, or, that kind of thing. But, everybody probably, a lot of people have something like that, I think. And yeah, I do sometimes think about it. I do worry, have I handled this right? And in writing about autism, I had a lot to learn, a lot to become aware of. And, I desperately wanted to get that right. And, I hope I have, but, I think it remains to be seen. I want the community, when the community reads it, we'll see, right? This is scary. It's a scary job.
Well, theoretically, if I take myself completely out of it, the fact that society will have progressed to the point that they recognize this thing that was commonplace now is not okay, it outweighs my need to have been right all along. Like it's better really that society has progressed forward. I hope.
Definitely, and that's very well said. Well said.